Main reason the Chesapeake residents and the Native Americans had disputes: land. The Indians thought it was their land. The whites who moved in from Europe said, no, it's ours, move off. Compare Maryland and Virginia. Why weren't they urban? I don't know for sure what this question was getting at, but the whole thing is that in the South, they developed an agricultural economy, and people lived on farms, and they came into the cities once or twice a year for trade purposes. And the few cities that existed were coastal, so that ships could come in and take the agricultural products across the sea or even to New York or wherever. Maryland Religious Toleration Act. Maryland, the land was given to Lord Baltimore so he could set up a colony for Catholics in England. And very quickly it became apparent that there were going to be more Anglicans or Church of England people there than there were Catholics, so they passed the Maryland Religious Act, which said that all Christians had equal religious rights. Okay? Compare Virginia with Plymouth. That means compare Virginia with Massachusetts. Remember the chart you did at the beginning of the school year? You might want to pull that out and read through it, but real quickly. Economically, the Virginia economy was agriculture. It was tied up with tobacco. Even if you were a subsistent farmer, you grew a little tobacco for your own use and maybe to sell. A subsistent farmer in Virginia would have grown corn to eat, to feed his pigs, and to make corn whiskey out of to sell. Okay, so it was all agricultural based. In New England or Plymouth, the economy was based around fishing, lumber industry, eventually shipbuilding, and some subsistent farming. But if you weren't a farmer yourself and growing enough for your family, you bought your food from the middle colonies, okay? Governmentally, in Virginia, they had a governor or governor's council, House of Burgesses. The governor and the governor's council were appointed by either the proprietors of the colony, the company, or eventually the king by the mid-1620s by the king. In Plymouth, they had the same thing, a governor or governor's council and a general court or an assembly. But there, all three things were elected. Okay? In order to vote in Virginia, you had to own land. Up until about 1650, to vote in Plymouth, you had to be a saint. You had to have gone through that church conversion experience, okay? After 1650, it was you had to own land. And Ben is right, you had to be a man in both colonies, okay? Religion, Virginia's Church of England. Plymouth, Massachusetts is Puritan. The Puritans had a kind of a theocratical society where the church has a big influence on what are the laws and what kinds of laws are enforced by the state. Do the ministers themselves run the state? No. Okay. Virginia church had far less influence because the Church of England never sent any bishops over. They had a few priests, and there were churches in the cities, but people only went to church when they went to the cities once or twice a year. Labor in Virginia, in the coastal plain, the Tidewater, they had indentured servants and then slaves. If you lived in the Piedmont, who did the work on your subsistent farm? Children did. You yourself did, okay? In Puritan communities, who did the work? You yourself and your kids, okay? The family did. So in America, regardless of where you came from, unless you came from the South and that really elite group of people who lived along the coast, pretty much everybody's families have done their own labor all along, okay? Who colonized in Virginia? It was men who came to seek wealth. And that's really true for the first 15 years or so of Virginia's existence. And then in Plymouth, it was Puritan families coming for religious freedom and economic freedom. Once again, another question. Economy of colonial Virginia, tobacco, tobacco, tobacco. Okay. Prior to 1800, certain slaves from Africa were held in higher esteem because of their skills in A, growing wheat, B, growing indigo, C, growing hemp, D, growing cotton, E, growing rice. Rice. The answer is rice. Remember, we don't talk about the South in the United States and growing cotton until what year? It's till at least 1792. Okay, and I would use 800 just to round it off. Why don't we talk about growing cotton? Because we don't have very much cotton because there's no cotton gin. Okay, hemp is grown primarily in, the closest hemp growing in this country is like some of the Caribbean islands, like Jamaica, or the Yucatan Peninsula, where they used to grow a lot and make rope out of it. Okay, Central America. Indigo, we start growing in the 1700s, and wheat requires no slavery. Okay, the Puritans who settled Plymouth were separatists. What other word do we sometimes use to describe those Puritans? It's another P word.
Pilgrim.
Pilgrims. Separatists and pilgrims are one and the same thing. Okay, they're the same. How were separatists and non-separatists different? Remember, there are three kinds of Puritans: separatists, Congregationalists, and Presbyterians. Presbyterians and Congregationalists thought perhaps there was a chance that the Church of England would see the light and correct its wrongdoings. It would get rid of its Catholic influences, okay? The Church of England is very similar to the Catholic Church because, remember, it started, it's Catholicism in the beginning with English instead of Latin. And Henry only started the Church of England because he wanted to divorce his wife, okay? And the Puritans want to get rid of those Catholic influences. That's their big thing. And the non-separatists hope that they'll see the light and do so. Why did they settle Plymouth? The first and foremost is religious freedom. But secondly, you can never negate the fact that they also needed economic opportunity. Okay, remember that those separatists had gone from England to Netherlands. They were starving to death there. Their kids were becoming too fat. So they moved back to England briefly to leave to come to the New World. Yes, yes. Mayflower Compact. When the Plymouth people came, they realized that they were not going to be settling in land that was part of the jurisdiction of the Virginia Company of London. So they signed a little document called the Mayflower Compact, which basically said majority rules. Okay? We'll elect a governor, we'll make laws together, but it's always based on majority rules. Is the Mayflower Compact a constitution? No, it is not a constitution. It does not set up a framework of government. That's what a constitution does. Describe what was Puritanism. Predestination, the idea that God has predetermined your afterlife fate. The conversion experience, that in order to be a voting member of the church, you had to be a saint, which meant that you had to show proof that you were destined to go to heaven. And you did that through, you know, praying, fasting, looking for signs from God, all of those kinds of things. Puritanism was a covenant with God. The community has an agreement or covenant with God that will behave in religiously good ways, okay? If Jared is misbehaving religiously, is God going to punish, according to the Puritans, Jared? No, he's going to punish us all, okay? So it's up to us then to make sure that Jared behaves. The importance of reading was part of Puritanism. The idea that every person should be able to read the Bible to find their salvation. So the Puritans set up schools from the get-go for their children. The idea that everyone should participate in government, or democracy, if you will.